Well, I'm not. Mom, I'm doing a recording. Well, I'm... No! Sorry about that. Well, like I was saying, before I was talking to my mother, I was gonna say, I think the subject matter needs to be attended to about Powerless, the TV series on NBC. I think Powerless is going to move to the CW because it hasn't aired on NBC for the past 2 weeks for the on-demand feature. And it's on supposedly when it's on NBC, it was supposed to be on air yesterday. Powerless, the comedy on NBC, but it was replaced by that new TV series. That new comedy series. So I think, honestly, in my honest opinion, I think Powerless is going to be moving to the CW. Because that's what they did for Supergirl. And that was on the CBS on Channel 2. But they moved it to the CW. So eventually, I think Powerless is going to move to the CW also, because eventually I think all DC related shows will move to Channel 5, because they have the Flash, they have the Arrow, they have the iZombie thing, which is also a DC comic, surprisingly. They have Legends of Tomorrow, which I watch every week. I watch The Flash every week, and sometimes I've watched The Flash for 24 hours straight, depending on what episode it was. That's how, because I'm a big Flash fan, I'm a big Legends of Tomorrow fan. I'm not so much of a Arrow fan, but I know people who are Green Arrow fans, but it's just not my cup of tea. But when they have crossovers like the Arrow and the Flash, I watch those. But I'm thinking Powerless will eventually go on to be on the CW, because on NBC's thing for the on-demand function, they don't have it on their thing. They don't have a new listing of new episode since what? They didn't even air episode 106. So I'm kind of surprised that they haven't aired anything since then. And yesterday they aired episode 107, which surprises me. So I'm kind of curious when NBC, or if they're planning on moving it to Channel 5, which is the CW. And if they do, I'll watch Powerless also, because I've watched almost everything that the CW has on Channel 5. The only time I watch Arrow, though, is when they have a crossover between The Flash or Legends of Tomorrow. That's the only time I watch the Arrow, because I'm not much of a Green Arrow fan, me personally. And for some reason, that's why I say Powerless is probably going to move to the CW or be on Netflix sooner or later, because it deserves to be on Channel 5. I would even replace Powerless with Supernatural, because that has nothing to do with DC. Honestly, Supernatural has nothing to do with DC. At least I don't think. So if I was a owner of a network like the CW, I would actually replace, because I think Supernatural's been on too long, with Powerless. Because if that happened to Supergirl, it's gonna happen to that series too. And formerly Supergirl was on CBS, but they moved to the CW network. But I wonder when or how they're going to move Supergirl on, or the Powerless show onto the CW. Let me rephrase that. Powerless on the CW, replacing that show in Supernatural's time slot. Because Supernatural, I know it's very popular and it's been on for 10 seasons, but it's just been on too long. Even if I was a fan, depending on the circumstances, I know the appeal in that aspect, but honestly, same goes for, I know Grey's Anatomy's been on. I feel the same way about Grey's Anatomy too, because Grey's Anatomy, when is Dr. Grey gonna actually take over the Grey's Anatomy place? When is she gonna actually take over her mother's job? But that's off topic. But I'm just saying, if you're gonna name a show Grey's Anatomy, wouldn't Dr. Grey eventually have to take over the reins of that whole show? I mean, that's why it's called that. But that's off topic again. But I would rather replace, like I said, Supernatural with Powerless. Supernatural needs to get replaced by Powerless, because that doesn't fit with the DC universe thing. I don't think. So, I think it's gonna move to the CW. That's what I'm ultimately trying to say. That Powerless, the 30-minute comedy that is on NBC, is going to move to the CW, because everything else is on the CW. I don't see why Powerless couldn't do the same thing I could just see that happening eventually, because you're talking about a comic-based show that is based around different superheroes like the Flash, Superman, of course, Batman, and I wouldn't mind Gotham moving to the CW also, because even though I don't watch based on Batman shows, I never did, but I wouldn't mind moving Gotham to the CW also, because that's the whole premise of Bruce Wayne's hometown, so where he lives. So I wouldn't see any issues with that being on the CW also. But ultimately, who knows? Maybe eventually, every network that it has to do, every show that has to do with the, what's it called? DC will move to Channel 5. Because that's what happened to Supergirl. It was on CBS and they moved it to the CW network. So that's just, I just have a feeling, because they did that with everything else, so I wouldn't be surprised if they did it with this one too, because it's a comic book based show, so I wouldn't see why they wouldn't move it, because they already replaced Powerless with something else with the new show for what's the one that the guy's on trial, but it's also a comedy, but I forget the name. I know what it is, but I can't think of the name right now. But I have a feeling that Powerless is no longer on NBC or going to be on there, because it probably doesn't have that much of a good rating, so I would move it to the CW. That's just how I feel about it, because they do the Arrow, the Flash, let's see, Legends of Tomorrow, and all that kind of stuff. They do all three on the same network. So I wouldn't be surprised, based on the comic book premise of Powerless, that it will move to this CW, because they need to have more superheroes, more villains, to make sense of that show. That's just my personal opinion, and that's actually a fact, because Jack-O-Lantern as the main bad guy in 3 episodes for that series? Nah, I think they need to diversify their villain premise on that show every so often. Powerless would be perfect for the CW. And I apologize for earlier, after this recording is done, when I was trying to record and my mom was talking to me, so I was like trying to say to my mom, I'm recording, so I apologize for that, and that's all I need to say. So eventually I think the CW will take over Powerless too, because they have iZombie, which that's also comic book based in the CW network. I didn't know that at the time, but now that I realize that, Powerless will probably do the same thing. So, who's to say? Maybe soon, because they haven't aired Powerless, his new episode, in about 2 weeks. Or their previous old episode and their newest one, which was supposed to air yesterday, which that means for on-demand people that watch it on-demand on cable, because they have their cable box full for their DVR, they probably have to watch Powerless and show other shows like that for on-demand features. So I'm saying Powerless will eventually be coming to the CW, because they have everything else. All they need is Gotham and Powerless. That's it. As far as I could tell, they have everything else, so I wouldn't see why Powerless couldn't do the same thing Supergirl did. So that's all I'm gonna say for today. I said my piece because I like Powerless too, but it's in the wrong network. It's on the wrong network, NBC, because it needs to be on a network that carries a lot of DC-based shows, which the CW does, which Channel 5 does. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was coming to that network too, eventually. Who knows when? I'm hoping soon, because I'm tired of seeing Supernatural on the Channel 5, because it doesn't have anything to do with comic books. I know it's got grotesque. I'm surprised that Supernatural isn't on Channel 4, actually, where Grimm is. That would make more sense to put Supernatural on NBC, in my opinion, because they both carry horror. Grimm is a horror-based aspect to the show. So some shows, like Powerless, are on the wrong network. They should be on Channel 5. Or Supernatural should actually be moved to Channel 4. That's just my honest opinion and honest fact. And that's the bottom line. That's how I see it. Because that's what happened to Supergirl. Like, it was on CBS, but they moved it to the CW after The Flash made a crossover. So based on the comic premise of that show, they need to move Powerless to the CW. That's how I just see it. They really need to, because how are you supposed to have a comic book based show with not all the superheroes? Like Supergirl, Batman, Superman. They should even move Gotham to the CW, which I'll probably never watch because I'm not much of a Batman fan, but you guys get where I'm coming with this, or going with this, because Gotham is DC also, so I would see where Gotham would have to move from Channel 11 and then move from Fox to Channel 5, because it just doesn't make sense when it's on Channel 11 and not on Channel 5, because it's based on Bruce Wayne's life, so as a young boy. So I would see where I would need to move it if I'm going to be, like, if I was able to buy a network and see where what shows I would have to buy and move it to that one network for every show that I actually want to, that makes sense to every show. Like Green Arrow, the Arrow makes sense on the CW. The Flash does. Supergirl does. Where's Powerless and where's Gotham? They're on the wrong network. That's just how I see it. So, who knows when they're gonna move it, because it hasn't aired in about 2 weeks for their newer episodes. For Time Warner, for Spectrum. So, who knows? That's all I'm gonna say for this video. And who knows when I'm gonna be able to see Powerless again, because it hasn't aired in about 2 weeks. So, that's all I'm gonna say. So, I'll check you out. Check you later. So.
Text to speech unavailable here. Text to speech unavailable here.